let's go straight into your view of where we are in the training community right now, kind of a snapshot of where we are.
Well, if I had to kind of like just really put it into a box, we have a small percentage of gun owners that are actually out looking for training, actively looking for training, that have really little to no experience in the training education side. We have a large group of people that have been through at least one or two classes in their history. So the problem is that most of the training industry is trying to cater to that smaller demographic, the guys that have kind of been doing it. And unfortunately, what has happened is that you got to keep adding to the pot to keep them interested enough to want to keep coming back. But when you keep adding to the pot, you also are creating a barrier to entry for all of these other folks that are just trying to get their feet wet. They don't know where they should go. Most of the descriptions for registration, they're like, that sounds like me. I think that's me. I'm going to go ahead and try it because I don't know where I belong. And then they find out, okay, I don't belong here. And it sets a really bad precedence as far as their future training potential. Like, oh my God, my first training class was a horrible experience. I don't ever want to do that again. Or I'm going to really kind of push back from owning guns or playing with guns or doing this stuff. It just left me with a bad taste in my mouth. Now, within the training side, it's great that we're continuing to keep the appetite high for those that have a strong set of skills and continually bringing challenges, keeping them engaged and making them work. Because unfortunately, a lot of these guys can literally just skate through a lot of classes because their skill level is high. So unfortunately, what's happening is that we're focusing too much on those really small group of and less on everybody else. And so now we're creating like this division within our industry between, oh, well, if you're not doing, because there's also that group of select individuals and then the group that wants to be in with the group of select individuals. And so now what we're doing is these select individuals may or may not, they may be wanting to expend a little bit more time in other classes before they start to go up into the sexier classes, the classes that have, all the cool appeal that everybody wants to participate in. So when I talk to some of the trainers and I ask them, like, who's your primary demographic? Is it a returning student or is it a new student? A lot of them are telling me that it's returning students, which is great because that means that you're producing a quality product that your customers are interested in and wanting to come back. But if you don't have a good offset between new student and returning students, then you're eventually going to kind of run out of returning students. So that's kind of how I see the industry right now. And there's a lot more in details, but that's just a, right off the cuff, kind of in your face, so to speak, my opinion of what's happening.
Just a question and you're, again, a lot of people who don't know your background, military background, SEAL background, you are one of the guys that has actually been there and done that and gotten the T-shirt. I've heard some of your stories over dinner, and you sit there with your jaw dropped. So you're an enormously experienced trainer. You've been in the civilian training industry for a long time now. How are you balancing that in your own courses between the upper end and then the reach out to the new people?
That's a great question, and something that I take my staff and myself work really hard, because one of the things that we want to do is every student that comes through our doors, I want three things for them. I want them to feel welcome, and I want them to be challenged. So welcome, I want them to feel like they belong. I want to tear down whatever barriers or walls are in place, and I want to get them to, because I know this industry, and you, just like you, there are so many valuable things about our industry, not just from the people, not just from the talent and the education that you're getting, but just in general. There's a lot of and I want to share that with all these people that have no idea about that. There's a picture painted by others that want to see us go away that's completely false. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that's the image or that's the vision that a lot of these newer shooters have to reflect on. So I want them to come in and see what we have to offer and then realize that I want them to be a part of it. I want you to be a part of this community because you are the community, you know? So I want them to feel welcome. I want them to have a good experience. And that's a hard balance, because a lot of times what you're trying to do is you're trying to balance between a positive outcome and a positive experience. And I think too many times people are putting heavier emphasis on the positive outcome. Did I get a high score in the class? Did I pass the class? Did I get some sort of badge or coin or recognition because I did something? And what happens is that becomes the sole focus of what people are coming to the class for. Oh, I just want to make sure I get a badge. I want to make sure I get top shot. I want to make sure I do that. I can appreciate that from a certain extent, but if you don't, was it worth it? Did you have a good, did you, you know, if you didn't meet that expectation, then where are you? Are you okay with that? Or is everything okay? So that's why I favor more of the positive experience, because if they have a positive experience, they're more inclined to want to come back. Because I mean, what we really try to do, our main focus is we want to try to ignite a fuel source within every student that then wants them to just pursue endlessly as much information as they can, ultimately putting us out of a job. That's my goal, is to be able to teach a student enough to where I no longer can affect any outcome, a behavioral change, because they're doing it on their own. And it's a balancing act between that positive outcome, positive experience. But I have found way more value in encouraging a positive experience. If we encourage that positive experience, the outcome you'll get there. You will get to that positive outcome. It will be, but it's less important about the outcome than it is the experience. And then the last thing is the challenge, which is really what you're talking about here. What I can have a class like, you know, this year we've had about 3 classes so far, and they've all been right at the intermediate level. Love doing intermediate level classes because it's welcome class. It allows people with maybe not the best skills to come in, and it allows people with really good skills to still be challenged. So it's very flexible. And as a trainer, probably the hardest thing that you have to manage is the different skill levels for every student that you're going to have in a class. You might have this class program for a level 2 class. And one of the other things that I see in the industry is lack of a true understanding of curriculum, what curriculum really is and what it is not. Curriculum is kind of like a question mark for a lot of people. So when we're looking at the different skill levels of the students, a lot of times what we try to do is we just focus on the medium, like where's the group at? Where's the middle, if you will. And then we just like, okay, you guys go over there, be there, and you guys just be safe. Don't do anything that hurts yourself. And, unfortunately, I get it. I understand that time management is a critical skill for any instructor, but if you're just focusing on the group, the mass right there in the middle, and you're excluding the higher achievers and you're excluding the lower achievers, out a positive experience that we're trying to get to. So you have to be able to scale your program for the skill levels that you have. So even if I have an intermediate level skill class, we can ramp that up to, like, we call it a 2.0 class. So like 2.0 in a collegiate kind of skill level. So we can go from a 2.0 to a 2.5. If we determine early on in the day that, oh, wow, these guys are killing it out here, let's not waste any time. Let's accelerate the curriculum. Let's get to more of a 2.5 intensity, and let's retest and see if they manage to hold on to that 2.5. On the flip side, maybe we're more at a 1.5. Maybe these folks are not really, maybe they're really not at the intermediate, but they want to be. All right. Well, I mean, you're not going to know how to get there unless you put the effort into trying to get there. And then as you fail, you reassess and regroup, and you get there eventually. So scaling for us is important. Not only do we scale the curriculum, but then we can also scale at the individual level. So I can have a lot of different skill levels in a class, and I might have a guy that's just a ringer, and maybe he's at this class because it's the only class he can get with his schedule. Crazy life experiences and all this other stuff, and that's the only class that fits his schedule, and it's maybe below his skill level as an advanced shooter. But he recognizes the value in just training and maintaining the skill, so he's going to do it. Well, once I recognize that he's got a little bit more of a, like a little bit higher level of skill, we'll challenge them. And we can challenge them in a lot of different ways. I mean, the obvious ways are any timed evolution, we decrease their par times. We'll, instead of having them shoot the RX distance of maybe 7 yards, to go back to the 10 yards. Instead of maybe shooting the RX target of 8 inches, they now have to scale down to 6 inches. So there's plenty of ways, and believe me, we challenge those guys all the time. And we have kind of like, we joke about it. We have like what we call our varsity scores and our junior varsity scores. And so most everybody that attends classes comes through under the junior varsity scores, which is the target zones are going to be 8 in the chest and 4% on all of your skill assessments. And if you do, you're going to pass the class, right? When I have a returning student who did well, maybe they didn't pass, but they did okay, I will give them the option. You know, if you're a returning student, you want to come back, you know what to expect. You hopefully have been practicing between the last time and your time. So I'll give you the option of scoring at the varsity level. So instead of scoring 8 and 4, they now score 6 and 3. So 6 inches in the chest and 3 inches in the head. And just that change alone stresses the student out to the max. Just know that they're going against a tighter standard, a harder standard for everything they do versus everybody else in the class. It's a complete game changer. So I love doing that. And you know, as an instructor, if you can't accommodate all those various skill levels, I would consider you to be flat-footed. You're very flat-footed. You're not, you know, you're just not able to kind of cope and adapt and deal with all the different varieties and variables that you have to deal with.
I've noticed that one of the things that you've been doing over the last like year and a half, couple of years, is a lot of focus on videos talking about concealed carry, kind of getting down in the very basics of concealed carry, kind of reaching out to these 8.5 million new people who all of a sudden went out and bought a gun, and now they're carrying the gun. But I've noticed you really focusing a lot on those videos that just they zoom in really closely on one aspect of concealed carry, and I think they're great. I think the videos that you've been doing have just been super. Tell a little bit about your strategies behind that.
So the irony of it all was the idea of bringing to the mainstream audience of our 8 million plus new gun owners a series of videos that they could watch and feel, again, welcomed, a part of. It's I don't want to call it basic, but to some extent it is. It's the stepping stone that we need a lot of these folks to be like where do we start? Most of these, and I'm sure you know this too, most of these 8 million gun owners, they're coming from a unique demographic. You know, they're middle-aged, successful. They have, you know, enough disposable income that they can expend, you know, money, resources on firearms, ammunition, and training. So, you know, we're in a unique place to where we can capture these folks. And my intention is to not only just welcome them into the community, but also encourage them to become advocates for our community. Like, hey, you know, this, you know, now that you're in it, now that you're on the inside looking out, you can kind of see things a little differently. Your point of view may change. You may be wondering, I'm not sure I agree with a lot of these new laws or laws that were in place that restricted those Second Amendment rights of everybody out there. And it's an interesting kind of like point right there, because during the pandemic, when I was working at the range here in Austin, you know, it was very interesting, right? We had so many people because, you know, you're finding yourself in a global pandemic. Resources are becoming scarce, right? Commodities, fuel, food, you know, electricity, all of this stuff is becoming a commodity, and it's difficult to get. So it becomes kind of valuable in that sense. And so people were finding themselves in a situation where, you know, I never would have thought in my life that I would have needed a gun, but add global pandemic and scarce resources. And now, because again, they're intelligent enough to say, most of these new gun owners were agnostic. They didn't care one way or another about guns. But you throw all that stuff into the pool, and now they become very interested. And so when we had a lot of these folks coming in, man, the availability of firearms during that peak period was, I mean, literally, it would get offloaded from a FedEx truck, logged in to our logbook, taken up, and before we could even put it on a shelf or into some area, it was literally handed to somebody. Somebody was like, "I'll take it. I don't know what that is, but that's a box. It's got a gun in it. I want it." It's like, well, do you want to know a little bit about it? Nope, just wrap it up and give it to me. But then they ran into this problem, which was the background check system completely crashed. The overwhelming, just the overwhelming nature of how many people were calling in to try to get background checks during that time period just was too much for the system to handle. And so there were periods of time where folks were having to wait 7 to 10 days to get confirmation back, just because the system, like, I think there was like a day and a half where it literally nobody would even pick up. It was just that bad. So people now have I need a gun, I'm going to go out and get a gun. And then they can't get the gun because they can't leave the store because they haven't cleared the background check. And so now they're like, well, wait a minute, I want to buy the gun. I need to buy the gun now. We're like, well, we understand that, but by law, you have to get a background check before you can leave with this gun. You can purchase the gun, but you can't leave with the gun. Well, what good is that going to do me? I don't know. What good is it going to do you? So, all of a sudden people are like, this is the dumbest law. And then, we're like, really? Well, that's interesting. I'm glad that you feel like it's a dumb law. And, that's when we also started to see a surge in LTCs, because in our state, if you have a carry, you bypass that whole background check. It's implied that because you have a valid LTC, you don't have to go through it. So all of a sudden, LTC started to skyrocket because people were realizing, okay, well, the way to get around that wait period is I just get my LTC. Of course, there was a wait period to get the LTC as well, but it was a good workaround for a lot of people. So the interesting thing during all of that was people started to realize that they needed guns, they couldn't get guns. And so my hope is that now they have a different point of view about some of the gun laws that might be popular. And I think what happens is that they look at that and they think about it, because again, all these people were agnostic, intelligent people, or I should say all of them, but a large majority of them. So now they see themselves, well, that seems reasonable. I'm a reasonable person. That seems reasonable. Yeah, I think reasonable. Put them in a global pandemic, add scarce resources. Let's throw some rioting in there, and let's also defund the police. All of this happening in an 18-month period, and now all of a sudden they're like, gotta have a gun. And so viewpoints, I think, have started to change, and now I'm hoping that they become more vocal about their constitutional rights, particularly their Second Amendment and their right to own a firearm, bear arms. Hopefully that kind of changes our landscape come, the midterms and future elections as we move forward. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for, and kind of like the underlying principle behind that. So we started that before the pandemic, but just due to the pandemic, we really weren't able to get it started until well within the pandemic. And so the videos, we partnered together with Brownells, and the series is called Daily Defense. And it's a tooth to tail kind of experience for a lot of these newer shooters. And what I'm very grateful for is to see the comments posted up in the YouTube comments or on the various social media stuff, where many of them were, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm a new shooter and these videos are great. I'm so grateful to be able to have a resource like this that gives me just enough information to feel in my own home, because that was a really hard thing for a lot of these people to come to grips with, is they didn't want to bring a gun to their home, but now they decided that they had to bring a gun to their home. So they just want to make sure that if they do, they have a modicum of safety, a little bit of education, and hopefully a little bit more training to come with it. So it's been hugely successful. We finished filming our 3rd season, and this summer we start our 4th season. So, and we got some really cool surprises coming up for our 4th season. Can't share them yet, but I will.
It's like I said, it was interesting handling new shooters, because I guess because of all the stuff that we've done, we tend to think in terms of skill enhancement, and they first tend to think in terms of confidence.
Yeah.
I need to know I've done the right thing, and part of what you're doing is you're explaining to me that, as a matter of fact, you did do the right thing.
Yeah. Well, there's so much with the, and I think where I was going was, I see a lot of these instructors that are doing great things. I mean, I see some of these courses and I'm thinking to myself, I'd like to go to that course. That sounds really interesting. And the way I kind of try to explain it is like, those are our thoroughbred racehorses, right? And we should be putting our thoroughbred racehorses, down at that level where their first exposure as a new shooter is with these folks, these guys and girls that are incredibly talented, very good instructors. They're providing good information for, the masses. But unfortunately, like I was saying at the beginning, a lot of them are, and I don't blame them, because unfortunately, a lot of times people are not interested in the basics or the beginning level stuff. There are this new group of people that are, but they're still like, nobody's really bridging the gap between what's happening over here and what's happening over there. So I know that it can be very stressful working with a new student. You've got you got apprehensions, you've got anxieties, you've got fears, you've got safety issues. And that's one of the things that I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that all instructors, if they are truly going to be a professional instructor and find this career path, should put a tremendous amount of time at training, working, and interacting with those types of shooters, because number one, it's extremely challenging for you. I don't want to say it's easy to work advanced level classes with dialed in guys, but it kind of is. In the reverse, trying to work with somebody that's a new shooter that doesn't know right from wrong, that doesn't know might understand that guns are bad, but they don't understand safe direction. They don't understand, home position. They don't understand these things to help them to be safe on the range. So your level of like oversight, your level of engagement, your level of involvement has to be so much more refined for them, because you can't, I don't want to say that we get a little bit lackadaisical with some of the advanced level shooters, but sometimes we kind of do. We kind of expect that they are a higher level. I don't necessarily have to worry about safety. I can trust that they understand safety, and we can kind of interact together as a group with a higher level of safety. It's a mistake to make that same assertion with new shooters, not because they would be, that there would be an accident, but because they don't have the knowledge base that understands safe from unsafe. And that's one of the reasons why they're coming to you, is because they want to try to get that knowledge base, which equates to, hey, I now have some confidence. I now understand a little bit more about right from wrong as it relates to a gun.
Just in terms of your background, coming out, I've seen pictures of your dog, and he's cool. Have you trained him enough so that he can actually go out now and start your car?
Absolutely. Oh no, not that far, but she's doing great. What's up, puppy? Yes, you're such a good girl. I know. Oh, hello. Hi, Peggy. Oh, you want some smoochies? Okay, I'll give you some smoochies. Yeah.
Oh. How hard was it coming out of a tier 1 military background to move to civilian training? How hard was that transition for you?
I'm not going to lie. It was very hard. On the professional level, personal level, it's another story, but the professional level, it was much more challenging than I was expecting. Part of the reason was because of my mindset. I assumed that everybody wanted to put in the work and to train hard and to recognize that this wasn't going to be an overnight success story, that this was going to take years to get to. And part of that was because I was accustomed to working with a certain type of individual, and that's the kind of, when you are around that all the time, those are the traits that you not only exhibit, but you look for in other people. You just expect that other person is going to have that same kind of characteristic trait. So I think it probably took me about 1.5 years, 2 years to really settle in and recognize, okay, a little bit different. I mean, one of the reasons why we were successful early on was because we were working more with kind of like our counterparts within law enforcement and then other military groups as well. So the transition was made easy because of that. And then I started to recognize that, the private citizen, the open enrollment public classes were really where it was at. Like, I could do unit level closed training until the cows come home, and I would have been very, very happy with that. But it also didn't completely fulfill a part of me that, I was looking to try to fulfill, which was that level of achievement that you have brought somebody who had little to no knowledge, and you have, in a sense, molded them into what I would consider to be, like a student/teacher for themselves. They now can teach themselves. They now can understand through self-awareness the mistakes that they're making. They're like, oh, I made that mistake again. Got to remember not to do that. Got to clean it up here, whatever the case might be. So that transition was hard. It took, once I kind of focused on that private sector, it probably took us about 2 or 3 years to really nail it down. And I think it was like the watershed moment for us was when we went from our traditional 3-day class. So all of our classes in the beginning, no matter who the client or customer or the student was, were 3 days long. And you talk to people that came to those classes early on, there's plenty of them that are still around. And while it was billed as an 8-hour class, I mean, we worked hard, but part of the reason was that it wasn't punishment. It was that we were putting that much time and energy into the development of students that sometimes it took longer. It wasn't like we're gonna power through 1,000 rounds in a day because that's what the curriculum says. It was just that sometimes we had to spend more time because students were not meeting the minimum standard to move forward. And so we would take a little bit time. Now some guys will say, oh my God, I was out there for 15 hours a day. I shot 1,000 rounds a day. I'm like, that's a little drama queen there. We did train long hours. We did shoot a lot of rounds. And so for me, the watershed moment was when we moved from a 3-day class to a 2-day class. And when we did that, we opened up the opportunities for more private citizens to attend classes, because now we're excluding a work day, a Friday, basically. So, I think at that moment I settled in and I was content. The curriculum, every year we do a curriculum review, and every year, we kind of like make little tweaks here and there, but the curriculum that we started with way back hasn't really changed that much. And that's sometimes like people will be like, you haven't changed your curriculum? I'm like, well, first of all, let's make sure that we understand that we're talking what curriculum is, right? Because everybody freaks out. Oh my God, you haven't changed your curriculum? If you developed your curriculum well in the beginning, then you really shouldn't have to really do a lot with your curriculum. What you end up doing is you end up doing a lot with how you deliver the curriculum. So the way that we delivered the curriculum 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago is dramatically different than it is today. And that's where I think that, a lot of people get lost in the weeds. Like there's some things that we did have to change some things within our curriculum. Round count and ammo became difficult. We had to manage that a little bit. What we did to accommodate that was we left it up to the students. We didn't change the round count in our classes. They were still the set round count, but we said, listen, here's what you can expect. If you can come with 75% of the round count, the listed round count, you have a very strong chance at succeeding in the class. If you come with 50% of the round count, you have a decent chance. If you come with less than 50%, I can't guarantee anything. That was just like, we said it a little bit nicer and more caring way, but that's basically what it amounted to. So we put the responsibility for choosing how you're training, how you wanted to receive your training on the student. If you wanted to spend the time to find 1,000 rounds, great. If you really only wanted to spend 700, 750, great. If you really only wanted to put in 500, great. But then don't be surprised by the results that you get. But I also tell people this as well. Some person that's only able to fire 500 rounds versus a person that's able to fire 1,000 rounds. Let's look deeper into that. If the guy that's firing 1,000 rounds is only kind of like half-ass attempting to really improve, okay, no big deal, right? But if the guy that's firing 500 rounds is doing so at a deep level of intensity and learning, I would much rather have 500. I would rather him put that level of intense focus and concentration in every round, every one of those 500 rounds, than the guy that's kind of lackadaisical with 1,000. And, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of debate about, how many repetitions does it take to become automated, to become instinctual? And I don't have a good answer for that. I can tell you it's a lot, but what I can tell you, a more refined response to that is that it's a lot of practice at a deep level of concentration. And so if you're putting a lot of practice in, but it's not at that deep level of concentration, then all you're really doing is kind of spinning your wheels a little bit. We have 3 buckets: a 100-round bucket, a 1,000-round bucket, and a 10,000-round bucket. And, we started to put together some pretty accurate numbers about skill level, like what you can expect in the amount of hours, rounds fired, and, time, basically time on target. We're starting to put together a pretty decent reflection of that. And so, the guy that only puts in 100 rounds, a lot of times, that's somebody that just really, whatever. The guy that puts in 1,000 rounds, you would think, okay, well, if 1,000 rounds good, 10,000 rounds has got to be better. But we get back into what's the quality of those rounds that he fired. If the quality of those rounds that he fired was at like that deep level of concentration, I would take 1,000 rounds over 10,000 rounds. So it's, when you start talking about the science behind, how we are wired, that's great. But without an understanding of what deep practice really is, I think you're just kind of like spinning your wheels on that one. So for me, when we started to address the other issues like ammo related, I told people don't feel like you're not going to have the best chance at doing well in the class just because you can't bring the ammo requested. Don't let that be a deterrent to coming, right? Because if you can promise me that you're going to take whatever the round count is that you can accumulate and dial up the level of intensity so that it's peaked at like 8 to 10 for the entire course, then we will accomplish a lot, and you will walk away with a very solid foundation, good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And it's worked, so I've been very happy. And what's interesting is when you put the onus on the student, can I just bring 500? Absolutely, go for it. But, make sure that you understand what's at stake when you do that. And then all of a sudden the same student shows up and they got 1,000 rounds. I'm like, what happened to 500? It's like, well, I give it some thought and, I think I better, this is an investment, I'm taking time off work. I'm driving all the way over here, blah, blah, blah. So I might as well shoot all the ammo. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. But I want you to fire all that ammo with that deep level of concentration, no matter what. So whatever you bring.
So how many classes are you teaching this year?
Actually, a lot lower number, and there's a couple of reasons for that. We have a lot of projects. So, the Daily Defense video project is a monster, and I love it. But we've got a lot of filming to do this season for that. Then we have another project tied to Daily Defense that's also going to take a lot of time. I also have a new project that I really can't wait to talk about, but I can't talk about it yet. But it's going to be very exciting, and I will definitely love to get your take on it. And so those, along with a couple of other, issues, personal issues at home, I am only doing, I think, about 12 classes this year. And, that's 12 open enrollment. We'll probably have about 3 to 5 unit level classes. We've already done a couple so far. So we'll probably get 1 or 2 more this year, which is nice because I'm not traveling as much. I'm probably going to be, 1 or 2 classes max. I might do a couple months with 2 classes a month, but I'm doing so much filming now that even though I'm not training, I'm still traveling to do a lot of the filming. So, I'm sure you're well versed in that. So
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
so now my, I'm kind of going, I'm getting a little bit more, we're still doing a lot of training. It's going to be a priority for us, but now with the amount of content that we're creating and preparing, it's becoming its own, it's becoming its own necessary kind of I have to manage it now. Like before I would just say, yeah, I could take a couple days, maybe a week off here, no problem. Now I'm like, oh my goodness. I've got like just right now, first quarter of this year, I've got like maybe 4 training classes, but I've got like 5 filming events that I've got in between all of this. So it's like, so I'm excited because it's a new chapter in my career. And, I'm excited because it's going to allow me to reach more people. It's going to allow me to kind of affect change at a much higher level. So I'm excited about it. People ask me, are you nervous about it? And I'm like, not really, but I want to make sure that we do a good job. That's the bottom line, is that we want to make sure that the product that we're bringing to the public is a quality product that people can get behind. And again, the target audience that we're looking for is that 8 million plus new gun owner that we're trying to bring into the fold and make them feel welcome.